You know the magic money tree they always gone about, the magic money tree? I think Jeremy's grown one in his allotment. That'll fuck him over, won't it? Ladies and gentlemen, this is, I can't think in my lifetime of another political leader, certainly in the UK, who has had a chant stroke theme tune. And I am about to introduce the man who, and this is a pretty exciting gig for you because he doesn't normally play small venues. It's normally the Pyramid stage now at Glastonbury. But he's going back to his roots, just doing the Forum, you know, just a little gig. So that is the White Stripes. I hope one day they manage to actually do that as well. I hope we get Jack White back and the White Stripes. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to a moment that I don't think, you know, in imagining 2 years ago, I think this is absolutely magnificent. Please welcome to the stage, Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Can I just ask you, before I go into what I want to tell you in my contribution and the others speaking a little bit later on, a dreadful disaster happened in London, wholly unnecessary, and a lot of people lost their lives in Grenfell Tower. And what I think is the only appropriate thing to do for this event now is to have 1 minute of complete silence in memory of all those that died and in solidarity with those that have survived and will live with the trauma for the rest of their lives, be they people who had family or friends or loved ones in that tower, or emergency workers who went in to try and save life, or indeed later to remove the body. So could we have a moment's silence, please? Thank you very much. Friends, thank you very much for keeping that minute's silence, and think for a moment of the lessons that come to all of us from what happened in Grenfell Tower. People died in the richest borough in Britain, living in poverty, living in stress, living in distress. Wholly preventable. None of those deaths need have happened. And those that went in to try and save life, fire, police, ambulance, paramedics, all deserve our thanks and our commendation. Those that did their best to comfort people as they came out deserve our thanks and commendation. But there's also some very harsh lessons that have to be learnt from this. Why was that building dangerous? Why are so many other buildings dangerous? Why have we had years and years of lectures of the dangers of too much regulation in the building industry and construction and housing standards? Why have we had so much underfunding of local authorities that it becomes almost a national crisis when 400 people need to be rehoused in the richest borough in this country? And they haven't been given a fair deal, they haven't been treated properly, they haven't even been given yet the permanent housing that every single one of them deserves. And so I hope and am determined to ensure that the lessons of Grenfell are learnt all over the whole country. We cannot go on housing people so badly that people are living in such overcrowded, apparently dangerous accommodation. So many living in private rented, insecure accommodation, even if it is in a council-owned block where the flat has been sold under right to buy and then let and sublet and sublet, and so people trying to find somewhere to live. And at the same time, tens of thousands of very expensive luxury apartments being built all over London and the southeast, deliberately kept empty as a land bank against the future rising of property values. It is not a sensible or serious way to run a housing policy. We will do things very differently. And John McDonnell pointed out just before we had the break the amount of resources that he will ensure are directed towards housing in the future in this country, so that the housing crisis is dealt with by building more secure council housing, by providing secure places for people to live in. And also, of course, that will provide good quality jobs in construction, good quality, well-paid jobs in construction, and good quality training in construction for people that need homes. A virtuous circle of dealing with a social problem by also dealing with the problem of the needs, particularly of young people, to get good quality, skilled jobs. It's called public investment. It's called social justice. It is what we are all about, and I suspect why we're here tonight. I want to say a huge thank you to everybody for the work they put in the campaigns that we've been through in the last 3 years. John has just assured me, and I believe everything John says, that there is not going to be a leadership campaign this summer. Are you right, John? He's right there. It must be true. He said it. So I do thank you for all the support you've given over the past 2 years, and crucially the support that was given in the general election campaign. When we started the general election campaign, the commentariat wrote us off. Pretty well all of the broadsheet and tabloid newspapers, with the exception of the Daily Mirror, wrote us off. Some others came round a little bit later on. And they said, well, it's a walk in the park for the Tories. They're going to be re-elected, and the Labour Party is heading to hell in a handcart. You're finished, basically. That was the quite simple message they put forward. And then we started the campaign. And it was incredible, the degree of confidence, of hope and support that was there. Only a few days after the election, well, in fact, the following day after the election had been called, we decided to go to my second campaign event, which was on the streets of Croydon. We went there at a few hours' notice, and 500 people were there straight away, ready to go out campaigning. And we went to the Northwest, and I was asked to pop in on a campaigning session that was about to start in Crewe and Nantwich. They hadn't even selected a candidate at that point, so I said, of course. So we went to Crewe and Nantwich, and I sort of said, well, how many people do you expect to be there? They said, oh, it's a small campaigning session, maybe 20, maybe 30 people. So we got to the town square in Crewe, 500 people in the town square, protesting about education cuts by Cheshire County Council, protesting about levels of unemployment and underemployment in that town. And throughout the whole election campaign, it was like a parallel universe of the experts, the commentariat, sitting in studios in central London, pontificating on what was going on beneath their very eyes, only 15 or 20 minutes ride away on a tube or 3 or 4 hours ride away on a train to anywhere in the country. That degree of determination and optimism in response to a manifesto which promised something transformational and something very different in our society, something that hadn't been offered for a very long time. A promise, and I mean it, a promise that the next generation will no longer get lectures that you've got to be worse off than the current generation, and that the children you have will be even worse off than you, that the healthcare won't be available, the pensions won't be available, the education won't be available. You're going to have to do it yourself, pay for it yourself, and the era of individualism is here. Well, anyone that cares to look at what's happening politically across the world will see the very opposite is the case. The absolutely very opposite. It's communities coming together. Communities coming together to say it doesn't have to be like this. There doesn't have to be people sleeping on the streets alongside unbelievable levels of shiny luxury in new apartments in big cities all across Europe. There doesn't have to be a growing gap between the richest and the poorest in our society. There doesn't have to be the stress and misery that exists for so many people trying to make ends meet and trying to survive in modern Britain. And we put forward a manifesto which does challenge an awful lot of this. It says, first of all, that we will properly fund our National Health Service so it won't be privatised, diced up, sliced up, cut up and given away to the private sector. It'll be a National Health Service worthy of the name of a publicly run, publicly owned and publicly employed service. And we will tackle the issues of mental health, and we'll tackle the crucial issue of social care. Ignore the issue of social care, ignore the crisis in social care. Who has to solve it? Predominantly women giving up their jobs, giving up their lives, giving up their careers to care for others because the state has let them down and won't do it. And so we are determined that we will approach these things very differently. But there's also the issue of justice within our society. After Grenfell, MPs of all parties were queuing up in Parliament to express their sorrow at what had happened and to thank the emergency services for what they did. Quite rightly so. Absolutely rightly so. I didn't hear too many people thanking the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea for its response, by the way. But a few days later, the opportunity comes. A vote is taken in the House of Commons about lifting the public sector pay cap. What do? Vote it down, vote it against it. So in other words, you praise the emergency services, you praise the NHS workers, and then say, thanks very much, you've done really well with a 14% pay cut in the past 7 years. Would you kindly carry on accepting that pay cut? Well, I thank everyone that works in the NHS. I thank them for what they do. I thank them for the sacrifice they make. But I want them to be properly paid for the work they do and the sacrifice that they make. So the government has relented a little bit on the firefighters, but we haven't heard the end of that one yet. And they're under pressure, and John was demanding justice for the public sector workers yesterday. But it's also about wage levels across the private sector. This is the only country coming out of the global financial crisis of 2008 where wage levels are still falling, where the relative level of income for those in work is falling compared to those very wealthy people at the top end, where the gap is growing. And it's not an accident, it's a design. It's a design if you reduce corporate levels of taxation, if you give giveaways in terms of inheritance tax or capital gains tax, or allow people to put money into tax havens around the world. We all pay a price, and that price is paid by the most vulnerable and poorest in our society and paid for by the stress levels of many more. We can, will, should and must do things very differently. So, during the campaign, On May Day, Becky Long-Bailey produced a very good list of workers' rights that we will be bringing in, starting, as John explained, with the repeal of the Trade Union Act to give rights at work from day one of employment, to end bogus self-employment, which actually is a way of the employer avoiding national insurance contributions, and give proper rights at work all the way through. That's what we are determined to achieve. But we're in the midst of something very significant around the world. We have injustice in this country. We have great dangers and stresses around the world, the derivation of the wars and a continuation of those wars. We have massive refugee flows brought about by the abuse of human rights, by the destruction of the natural world and the environment, and we have many people just trying to survive in various parts of the world. Surely this is a time to have a government whose international strategy and policy will be dedicated towards supporting, defending and protecting human rights of people all around the world, whatever country they live in and whatever regime they are under. And a government that would not be timorous in picking up the phone to President Trump and tell him Paris climate change agreement meant something very, very important. Sign up to it, keep on with it, and we will all keep on with it also. Don't walk away and allow this continued environmental destruction of our planet. And so there are issues there. There are issues there about peace, about disarmament, and about how you reach out to the rest of the world, and what human approach you take to it. Do you blame refugees for being refugees, or do you look to the war that caused them to be refugees in the first place and try and bring about that peace that they all crave? And so, in the period we've gone through for the past 2 years, we've been discussing, all of us together, methods of campaigning and how we get that message across and how we unite people. And I think it's very important that we don't just stop now, we actually redouble those efforts. Because what this recent election campaign showed was that people can see past the printed media. They can see past the abuse that happens of individual politicians. I know that there are many people that apparently say very rude things about me from time to time. It's okay. It doesn't matter because I don't read it anyway, but I'm told about it. But it says something about a society that you can abuse people in that way and some or other think it's clever. My colleague Diane Abbott, MP for 30 years in Hackney North and Stoke Newington, has suffered the most unbelievable level of misogynist and racist abuse on social media for all of her time in Parliament. She deserves support and recognition for what she's been through during this time, as does any other person who's received those levels of abuse, because it's wrong. We don't want it done to any of us. We shouldn't do it to anybody else either, because if you get into the gutter with somebody, it's often very hard to get out. It's much better to stick to the principles you believe in, the message you want to put forward, and the kind of community and society that you want to build. But what this election campaign also showed was that the day-to-day door knocking in the campaign is absolutely crucial. Talking to people, getting their voting intention and hopefully encouraging them to turn out and vote. That's very, very important. It's absolutely essential. But there's also the campaign of just discussing politics with people. And what I noticed was, in every college I went to, every university I went to, every factory I went to, every place I went to around the country, people were asking questions about justice in their society, questions about their lives, and questions about the kind of world they want to live in. It was very, very different to any other election campaign I've ever been involved with. And at the end of it, we had an amazing number of rallies. They got bigger and bigger as time went on. And you know what? They were characterized as this, they were characterized as that. And I said to every audience, look around you and look at each other. You're young, you're old, you're black, you're white, you're disabled, you're gay, you're straight. You are representative of every possible thing in our society. But you know what? You're brought together by a belief that we can do things differently and better together. It's called socialism. But it was also about how we treat future generations, how we bring people up. And so I find something deeply offensive that head teachers go through the most amazing levels of stress because they can't fund the school properly. They don't know which teacher they're going to have to get rid of at the end of the year because the budget won't cope. They don't know how many teaching assistants they can afford next year. They don't know in secondary schools which subjects they're going to have to give up on. The stress level is incredible. The overcrowding in our classrooms is getting worse and worse. And the lottery of preschool nursery provision is getting more and more acute. Our manifesto, fully funded, fully costed by raising taxation to the top end in order that the rest might benefit, did promise we would give 30 hours a week preschool to every child, irrespective of what their parental income was or where they were, and that we would properly fund primary and secondary schools, and we'd look again at the inspiration, the joy, the hope, the music that's there in all children. And I'm very proud of our commitment to bring in a pupil arts premium that every child can learn music in school. Because it gives them that imagination and that growth. But further on, those that go to college in order to learn a skill, learn a trade, become an electrician, become a plumber, become a cabinet maker, a carpenter, all the things that are there to be done, want to go on to university and study. They know they're going to have to pay fees in a college, they're going to have to pay fees in a university, and they know they're going to come out with a big debt. I don't know if the Tories fully understand this, possibly they don't. Not every child has a big bank of mum and dad to go to. They have to borrow that money and go deep into debt in order to get an education. That means many drop out, many don't get the qualification they deserve and they want. We lose because we don't have those trained, qualified people within our society. And so we put forward the proposal and it got widespread support. We will raise tax on those that can afford it to make sure that education is available for all throughout their lives. And I'm very proud of that. And what this has done is excited people into rediscovering their history and their roots, rediscovering how the vote came about, how women got the vote, how we fought for the rights of people to be themselves. We fought to get strong anti-racist legislation. We fought for that multicultural society. We fought against discrimination of any form. People begin to understand where their history comes from, and that gives them that great confidence. And whilst we didn't quite succeed in winning the election, nobody says we lost it. Everybody says what we achieved was quite amazing. And so we're going to take the fight to the Tories. We take the fight to them on wages. We take the fight to them on public sector spending. We take the fight to them on investment all around the country. We take the fight to them on public ownership of the industries that John mentioned, particularly rail and water and post, particularly those industries that are crucial to all of our lives. We take the fight to them. We don't stop now. We carry on with that campaign. I'm going to go to every single one of the 73 marginal constituencies we've got to gain in the next general election. And our teams be going to all of them as well. We're on a campaign footing all the time. If this government can find £1 billion to bail out the DUP in order to get a deal with them in order to stay on in office, I find it a bit strange they can't find any money whatsoever for doctors, nurses, care workers, all those people that do a vital job within our society. So we challenge them. On all those principles of social justice, and we bring people together in doing so. So let's be characterized as a campaign that brings people together, that gives a community that sense of hope for itself. The best response to what happened in Manchester, in London Bridge, what happened in Finsbury Park, is to bring people together, bring communities together. Don't let those that want to divide us succeed. Our movement is a movement for social justice, is a movement that is standing up for the rights of all people to be able to live decently in their society. We've achieved a great deal by coming together. We've achieved a great deal in the way we presented and conducted ourselves in this election campaign. And to tell you what, I can't wait for the next election campaign to come along. I can't wait for that day we can win an election for the needs of the most vulnerable and poorest in our society, but above all to make that declaration of our democratic power together, of the kind of world we can create together, where we don't have to bow to the biggest corporations and the richest. We don't have to bow to the powerful and those that lecture us. We are ourselves. We are, after all, the people. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jeremy Corbyn!